everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Nora Osman, founder of Norvana, a boutique customer experience optimization advisory company focused on helping organizations transform and gain market advantage by prioritizing the human experience. I'm also a newly minted author. My book, Zero to Hero, The Human Experience in Leadership and Business Transformation, officially launched just March 4th of this year, 2026, just a few weeks ago. So today's digital dialogue is a bit of a special one for me. It's really about unpacking the book through the lens of those who leaned in early, read it with curiosity, and offered honest and thoughtful feedback along the way. Now, I am a bit biased. Nobody wants to hear their babies called ugly, so I'm no exception. But what made this experience meaningful for me was hearing from leaders who didn't just read the book, they reflected on it and ultimately used it and expressed their sentiment very openly. And that's what helped me realize that this book is ready. And not only is it ready, it is needed. So today they said yes again. And they said yes to sharing those insights more openly and with all of you. So before we begin, I'll take a moment to introduce them as our panelists, and I'm going to read their bios as they've provided them to me so you can hear directly how they chose to represent their journey and work. First up is Michael Smith, who is currently the owner of the Carrick Rangers Football Club, where he's focused on building a sustainable community driving future for the club in Northern Ireland and qualifying this year for Europa Conference League. Look at him grinning. So much pride. I love that. Before making the move, though, into football leadership, Michael began and he spent many years in the technology sector, serving in executive roles at global organizations, including ones you know, like Nike and the Estee Lauder Company. Beyond the corporate world, he has always looked for ways to use his platform for good, most notably as the founder of the Tech Day of Pink initiative and through his ongoing work with TechPack to help bridge the digital divide. Welcome, Michael.
Thank
So
you.
good to have you.
Great to be here.
And next is Andrea Markstrom. Andrea is the Global Chief Information Officer for one of the world's top law firms, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶 LLP, based out of New York City. She's responsible for the firm's technology and cyber strategy and ensures the technology organization is delivering value, innovative solutions, and superior services. With an intentional focus on digital transformation, Andrea leads initiatives that are pivotal in transforming organizations, enabling them to embrace cutting-edge technologies and optimize their operations. Andrea has more than 30 years of experience, though she doesn't look like it, right? She looks like she only has 10 based on her age. And she has all that experience leading global information technology organizations for large law firms and corporations. Andrea is also a mentor for Northeastern's Technology MBA program and a board member for several legal tech companies. Additionally, she is the founder and CEO of 𝗗𝗄𝗏, Inspiring Women Igniting Leadership and Learning, an inclusive professional network organization helping individuals advance in their careers, rise above challenge, and bring inspirational change across the globe. Welcome, Andrea. So good to have you.
Thank you. Grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least is Jeff S. Tunn. Jeff is an author and storyteller whose work explores love, legacy, and the quiet ways history shapes our lives. His forthcoming book, Uncharted Moments, Love, Legacy, and the Lewis and Clark Trail, traces a 6-year journey with his wife, Carmen, as they followed the Lewis and Clark Trail across the country, discovering unexpected connections, sacred moments, and a deeper understanding of what it means to travel life together. Before turning his focus fully to writing, Jeff spent more than 4 decades in technology. Again, he does not look it, right? Technology leadership as the CIO of several institutions, including Goodwill Central Indiana and Loth Property Group, among other senior level positions. Today, his work is focused and rooted in rivers, landscapes, and the enduring pull of uncharted ground. Welcome, Jeff. So good to have you as well.
Thank you, Nora. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation this afternoon.
Same here. And I eventually want to take these glasses off because that's not my best look. I feel like I'm 10 years older looking with these glasses. But thank you again for agreeing to come on this podcast and talk openly about your experience with Zero to Hero. And again, there are no rules around what you can and cannot say. I really want this to be an open dialogue. So I'm going to lead with a very simple question. Since each of you were tapped on the shoulder to read this book before it was published, well in advance of that, I wanted to ask you, what stood out to you when you read this? The first impression you had, and what stayed with you as you were reading the book? So since the first person who actually read this book with me or for me was Michael Smith, and he could tell you all about how I asked him, I'm going to start with you, Mike.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to really narrow down one thing that stood out. I mean, the whole book was full of these incredible stories that resonated, and things that I would say most of us have experienced at some point. But the lessons that you pulled from them are incredibly insightful. You know, I think if I had to pick one story that stayed with me the most, it was one where you talked about the manager. I think you called him Z-Man, if I remember correctly. And you know, he compared this, compared you actually, high performing employee, uh, to a shrub living in the shadow of all these pine trees. And you know, I've seen that happen so much, and that resonates with me because it captures that impact of the zero moment, where a leader's you know, their mindset, myopic as it is or biased as it is, can instantly devalue just all these years and years of contribution, the mastery of your craft. All of these things just devalued immediately. And so, you know, when you're in these high stakes environments, like many of us are, whether it's a boardroom or in my case now, you know, maybe a football boardroom, this illustrates that leadership is really not ever neutral. You're always, everything you do is either fueling a person's fire or it's extinguishing it. And, you know, that to me is a powerful reminder that sometimes everything that we do can be a toxic interaction or it can be a fueling interaction that's a catalyst for somebody to aspire for something more and strive for something more. So incredible.
Using that story, and I have to share that I hesitated to even tell it because at some point I didn't want to be teased about being a shrub. And I remember my daughter, when she finally started to read the book, she said, about this Z-Man guy. What the hell? What's he thinking? Like, you're a shrub? What kind of you know, interesting items was he on at the time? What was he intoxicated or what? But it is really about that defining moment where words matter and they hit you. And us as leaders or managers, we sometimes don't realize that our intentions may have been good, but the way we executed really just didn't go that way at all, right? And I heard you chuckling in the background there, Jeff. So did you want to comment on that story, or do you have something specific that resonated as well?
No, I love that story as well. And, you know, sometimes our words, we mean them so right, so correctly, but they just get received wrong by the other. Not wrong, but you're communicating with someone who's hearing something that you're not trying to say, right? Like like Z-Man. He probably had good intentions, maybe. I don't know him. What really stood out for me as I read this book was that whole concept of the leadership journey, right? That we spend a lot of time on the mechanics of leadership and management, but leadership is really that internal journey that you go on. The doubt that you may feel as you're walking into different situations, the tension, and it just reminded me so much of my career and my journey. The book follows your journey through your stories, but what it brought to me was my journey, right? I could put myself in those situations or think of situations that I experienced in my career. And it's like, yeah, you're exactly right. It's what's happening inside you when you're trying to do the right thing. And that's the piece that still stays with me after reading the book.
Well, thank you. I think that's really impressive to hear. And I struggled with this a little bit because I didn't want the book to feel like it was written only for one gender or for one phase of a person's life or transformation. So I'm going to pitch this to you, Andrea, because obviously, you had very strong emotions, and you sent me a very long email one night that had me in tears when I finally read it. And I was like, yes, a woman's voice is telling me something. So what stood out to you when you read it? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably go off on a little tangent here, or go a little long, because there were so many moments that stood out for me when reading the book. As Michael and Jeff both mentioned, words matter. And when you were talking about the story about Mr. Z, I've had similar situations like that. So when I read that story, I'm like, oh, I can relate. That person said that to me. That person said that to me. But then I hesitated. I'm like, oh my God, what am I saying to people? Right. And that really struck me. And that ties into, I love your concept of the platinum rule. I mean, we've all heard, like, do unto others as you would like to be treated, so to speak. But I love how you switch that around, and it's really about how should you treat people how they want to be treated. And that really has stayed with me, not only in my professional journey, but also in my personal relationships. And I think that's really something that we have to think on the forefront always on. How are we treating people? Because every person is different, and you go into great detail about that in your book, which too made me really think about, as we lead, not one size fits all, right? It's really getting to know people. It's really all about the people, and what makes them tick and what makes them move forward. I'm going to mention too a couple other moments in the book that really made me hesitate and relate very much so, is the power of possibility. So you mentioned another book called The Secret, which is one of my favorites, and it is it's really the art of manifestation. And it took me a while to learn that and to really keep my eyes open to the possibilities, but it works. And I loved that you referenced that in there. And that's really, I think about in my career now, and I didn't do this when I was first a leader, and I wish I would have, but now I really think about, how do we translate that into other people thinking about their possibilities, and the art of the possible, and anything is possible, and they should visualize their journey and their future. And so I love that you talked about that in your book. And then the final thing I'll mention is just the concept of being a Wonder Woman as a woman. And we play multiple roles, and it's not just Wonder Woman, it's Superman, right? Like, we all do it. We all have to say yes, and we do it anyways. And there's multiple hats that we wear, and don't give up, and just do it. So I loved that reference. And also, to our male allies, I mean, that's what we do. And so anyways, I could go on and on. It's a very powerful.
Those are really powerful examples. And by the way, you have two of the most amazing male allies on this call right here, right now. And they are always advocating for women and for diversity and for opportunity. So to be fair, I almost didn't include that chapter in the book because when the one chapter 14, the womanhood experience, because I was concerned that it would be too biased and men would say, oh boy, here's another woman saying, woe is us, and you don't understand this and all that. But then I said, do it anyway. Do it anyway. Let somebody else tell me to take it out, right? And have a publisher that was going to strike it out. But I had readers that were going to say, this doesn't make sense, or I don't think you should put it in this way or rewrite it. And the first person who didn't tell me to rewrite it was Michael, who was kind of surprised. And I think you were sitting next to me when you were reading it. So maybe you were under pressure, like you were being extra nice. I don't know. But I kind of felt I would see it in your body language if it made you uncomfortable. But it didn't. Or did it?
No, it didn't. It's maybe the most powerful chapter in the book, of a book that's full of powerful chapters.
Yeah. I will share that every time I read that chapter, I sobbed a little. And I remember my kids would come down. I'm like, why are you emotional? What is going on with you? And I was rereading the stories and reliving them. And there are probably 1,000 more stories that could have been in that chapter, but that would have made it its own book.
Mm.
But I felt that we needed to lean in with empathy and start to understand each other a little bit better. But Andrea, thank you so much for calling my favorite concept to light, the platinum rule, because I did not coin it, by the way. This has been around way before me. I just latched onto it and I told the story of how I learned about it. So it's part of the leadership journey, understanding it and putting it to use. So, Jeff, you do a lot of writing. Tell me a little bit about the process of reading somebody else's journey and how that felt to you compared to your own experience writing and journey telling.
To me, it was, I said this earlier, it was like reading my own journey when I was listening in my head to your stories. Because you and I, we really didn't know each other very well when I first started reading the book. So it was giving me insights into you as the author, which as a fellow author, I love knowing what's going on in the heads of other writers. But it was also reflecting my journey back to me, which I think I think that's the gift of the book, is that your stories are specific events that happened in your career and in your life, but they tune the reader into stories that happened in their life. And I found myself, as I was reading, kind of going off on a tangent on something that happened to me that was similar to the book, right? And then I'd have to come back to the book. But that, to me, that's the gift. And what I try to do through storytelling is the same thing, right? You're writing about a specific episode or a specific occurrence, but you want the people to use the book as a mirror and see themselves. And your book does that so well. And as Michael and Andrea were talking, I was coming up, I could have conversation with just the four of us, right, about this book. Because I thought the chapter 14, the womanhood chapter, I thought it was one of the most powerful chapters in the book as well. Reading it as a male, two different things stood out to me. One was there was a lot in there for me to learn about my own leadership, but also the women that I work with and understanding some of what they're going through. It brings forward that empathy. But I think it's a dual lesson. It's teaching me about my own leadership, as well as helping me be an ally, a better ally, because you called Michael and I great allies. We can always learn more and we can always do better. And to me, that chapter stood out from for that reason. So I don't know if I answered your exact question, Nora, but I really enjoyed it.
You really did, and that was really taking a leap forward and trusting that this is going to land for the right people in the right place. Look, when you write a book, not everybody has to read the whole book. Some people browse and some people read chapters or parts of the book and skip. And you hope that the right people will read the right thing and get something meaningful out of it, right? And so I didn't have any set expectations, but what I did have were a lot of aha moments around what it feels to express things outwardly that have been secrets in your head or that you lived and kind of buried a long time ago, right? And there's something that happens when you start to talk about other people in your stories where you are afraid to trespass on their privacy and expose them in a negative way. And so you're very cautious with how you do it, and you don't want to breach that trust and that privacy barrier. And hopefully, I did not do that publicly, but it is a difficult thing to get just right. So I wanted to ask you, all of you, this simple question around leadership now, because we're in such a sensitive time in the world. I'm not going to even talk about wars and economic climate or even AI, but in general, there's just so much going on. And you hear about the layoffs and the news about what's happening with certain changes in leadership and strategies. And now you've got this technology shift with automation and AI. Where do you see leadership evolving in the future, given all of that, what we're seeing here right now? And how do we keep the humanity aspect front and center? Or can we? So I'm interested in your ideas on this. Whoever's ready to just jump in. Loaded question, I know.
Kick it off. It's Nora, as mentioned, super interesting time, and especially with AI and the pressure to get it right and to make sure ethically we're using it right, and then, God forbid, how do you ensure that it's being adopted, and all of the above. It's an interesting time, leading a technology organization, providing those services to companies. And then as you mentioned, how do you ensure that it's human centered? When so much of it is really focused on the automation and driving efficiencies. So all that said, I think now, leadership now, what that means to me is taking a breath and really listening more so than ever. I think now we have to listen to our customers, both internal and external, listen to our team, because our teams, they're nervous as well. Like, how is this going to change their careers? So it's how can we pull together as a community to do what's right for our people and make sure that we bring them along. So I mean, that's the biggest piece that I think about what we can do as leaders now is to listen and make sure it's inclusive, and we're bringing our team along to make sure that they're front and center. I love, one of the things that I think about in your book that resonates with me as we as we go on this leadership journey that we're in now, is the hero moment. Now more than ever, I think that's where we have to not only level up our teams and people around us, but present them the opportunities to be heroes. And so bringing them along and making sure they're front and center, because otherwise, especially with everything going on, they could very much be on the sidelines. So
That is really well articulated, and I love how we've wove that in. Good grab. Wove that into the whole concept of the hero and zero moment. And a lot of people think those are concrete, separate, very distant things, but zero and hero happen in seconds. You have a total zero moment, and a second or two later, it completely transforms. Or you could be having a hero moment, and in a second, it's a zero moment, right? So there's a huge shift and pivot that happens because of the circumstances and how you react to them. And I think a lot of people think about the hero always being themselves or the zero being themselves, but it is about everybody around us too. It's not just us. We're not always front and center in the story. Sometimes we're in the sidelines or on, just in the background, right?
Well, I think being a leader, it's nothing about, I mean, you are not the center of gravity. And if you are, you're in the wrong role.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I hear you. I told this story, and I think it was earlier in the book around Doris Day. If you remember this young lady that made it to the finals for a category with HDI, and I had just resigned actually my post in my company, and yet I wanted to be there for her. And finally, I went to the event against all odds. Mr. R was my manager at the time, and he said, absolutely, you need to be there, which was very, very interesting, a very selfless move, right? A director who needed to make sure everything was transitions still paid and spent time rallying for the presence of the team as intact as it can be at the moment, so that we can elevate the experience for one person. But I tell this story because it was around thinking outside of the box and taking my comfort out of the equation and putting the spotlight on the person who deserved to have that chance. And of course, I will never know if, if I hadn't been there, if it would have been a factor at all. Maybe she would have won anyway. But the idea of her squirming in pain because she was wearing brand new shoes. Like the last thing I wanted for her is to take her shoes off and walk up on stage barefoot. That would have been a terrible, terrible zero moment, you know. But I thought it was a jarring story to a lot of people that read it, because the hygiene of it was probably going to come out and say, "What the hell were you thinking?" Um, Michael, you're nodding your face. What do you think?
Well, I think it was a great moment of empathy, right? And that's at the core when you ask about kind of all these things that are happening around us, right? I mean, I think we have to ground ourselves in empathy, and we have to ground ourselves in the values that show us what is right, and make sure that we're doing what is right,
And not what's
even
easy.
even when it's hard, right? And so
Mhm.
I you know the uh, we talk about big presentations, big strategies, all of these things, and they're important. Uh, but it doesn't really matter what we stand up and say or the presentation we give if we miss those moments of daily interaction with people. And I think they're critical. I wouldn't minimize, even though the things that are happening around us are big and sometimes can feel overwhelming, right? If you're in the middle of a reorganization or a downsizing, or the geopolitical things that are happening around us, um, we shouldn't minimize just that impact that we can have with just every little interaction, right? It's a chance to either elevate or erode, and whether it's
Right.
elevating an individual or elevating the by how we respond to them, how we uh, interact with them, or that choice between right and wrong, taking the easy route or taking the hard route that's the right thing to do. Every
Yeah.
one of those is a moment to elevate or erode, and you have to be consistent with that, and you have to demand that accountability of yourself, demand that accountability of others, and um, that's really what leads to truly success.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're talking about moments of truth, right?
yeah,
And I say this, I think, in the first few chapters over and over, which is every interaction with a human is a moment of truth, and you're either a hero or a zero. And it sounds very jarring hearing it as, one or the other, but it's really that simple.
Mhm.
Most times you can be a hero, or it can be a hero moment, most times. But then sometimes you don't realize something trivial, something simple that was said or not said could be the difference. And so,
I think
yeah,
it was the realization that that was the case for me, and that may be true for every one of us here. Is that the realization of that became the burden of leadership in many ways, right? Because you realize that every moment, and um, and and you realize that you're not perfect, and you're going to have those zero moments where you miss the moment, and you maybe erode versus elevate. And so that really to me, that summarizes the burden of leadership more than anything, is realizing that literally it is every single action and interaction.
yeah, absolutely.
Add on a little bit to that. Michael, I love that. And that is, I mean, it's such a, first of all, the burden of leadership, when you mention that, it's like, yes, you feel that every single day. And I know there's so many times that I had the zero moment with either a person on my team or my entire team, and how, like, it's like, oh my God, how do I fix that? Right. And I'll never forget, like, one time I brought my whole team together, and I'm like, I'm sorry, like, I screwed up. And I was a little worried about doing that, because you show your vulnerable side, but hey, we need to do that. And it actually ended up being what I didn't think would be a hero moment, but it did. People came after and just said, thanks for doing that. But I'm like, well, I really screwed up. So, I needed to apologize. It's those, yeah, the burden of leadership is, it makes you really think about how we are present for every person.
What you're referencing is authenticity, though. And
Yes.
I do spend some time in this book talking about the ABCs of leadership. And the first is the authenticity factor. I don't know that we can really recognize or applaud a leader who's not authentic. It's so core, foundational to leadership that it has to be there, right? And so when you do fall on your sword or acknowledge your own missteps and your faux pas, that is huge in building trust and continuing to have intimacy with your team. And I also think that that turns them to more compassionate workers and supporters. When they see that authenticity, they see that you're humble and you're a human. That makes them want to follow you and be in your corner. And that's also being bold, right? You're not doing it in a, let me talk to one person at a time and
Mhm.
make sure they don't congregate and form an alliance against me. That you did it very openly. So bravo.
Well, and they start to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
They see you modeling using that behavior, and they're going to start being authentic with each other as well. Um, I think Andrea said this a little bit ago, and I want to go back to it because I think it was just so important for leaders, and that was, you have to pause. How many times do we do that as leaders? Do we really take the time to pause and understand what's going on? And I think you bridge that into listening. And sometimes you have to listen for what's not being said.
Exactly.
Right. And the only way to do that is to pause and observe and really take in the whole moment. I thought that was incredibly powerful.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's the look, listen, learn concept, right? You have to make enough time to look and listen, because if you're missing signals, you're acting on misinformation and you're going the deep end quick. But I feel like we've got a bias for efficiency these days instead of effectiveness. And I know it was Stephen Covey that said effective first, efficient second. Maybe it's not him, but I think it was. But you really get, I guess, pulled into fast, 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 fast. Let's move on, and being very efficient with people and efficient with people. And that's a mistake. I think if you are constantly trying to just get through process and procedure, you're missing the signal to apply the platinum role, which actually builds more trust and allows you to see their strengths and elevate them and create those hero moments, right? Yeah. So that is a really interesting pivot. So I did talk a lot about pivots and career pivots, and one of the things I worry about is not enough leaders actually talk about the missteps in their career in a very formal way. Meaning, hey, this was a failure or a challenge, or I really screwed up and it landed a big pivot for me. So let me share it openly. It's almost like we keep it as a secret. We only tell it to our secret society. So part of authenticity and vulnerability, I think, is sharing, a pivotal moment and using that to help excite people or motivate people or inspire people. So I'll ask you, in any of the stories, or was there a section of the book where you heard about a pivot or a moment that you reflected on your own pivot? And would you be willing to share what that pivot was?
There's so many times that that in my career that I didn't have the next step planned out. It just kind of happened. But when I was reading that part of the book, one of the things that came to my mind was this. I mean, just a horrible screw up on my part. I was a new director for a global consumer electronics company. And we were tasked with forecasting a potential layoff that was coming. So I made this beautiful PowerPoint deck that named names and positions and what I would do and how I would compensate for this person being laid off and that person being laid off. And I scheduled a meeting with my boss and I attached the PowerPoint presentation to the meeting, and it was public, and someone found it. And someone leaked it out to my staff. And it was like,
Total zero moment.
Holy crap, right? What do you do? What do you do? So I called a team meeting and brought everyone together and said, yep, I wrote this. This is a plan. But aren't you glad that we at least try to plan for these things rather than seemingly be haphazard? There is a plan, and this is not necessarily what's going to happen. It's, if you read the PowerPoint, there are options and this and that and this and that. But I think the moment of calling people together, bringing them together, and just saying, I screwed up. I should not have made that meeting notice public. I shouldn't have attached the PowerPoint. But part of my job is to plan for budget cuts. And being real and honest that, yeah, I screwed up. So to me, that was a pivot into a different kind of leader. Again, I was a new director and didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, if we ever know what we're doing, right? But I certainly didn't know what I was doing. But it helped me pivot into a people first style of management and leadership. And at that particular company, it wasn't always people first. That was not always the way that you did things.
Yeah.
But that was the way I started to do things, was people first.
Oh, I love that story. And it sounds like you leaned into more authenticity and really being true to yourself and to your core,
Yeah.
and worrying too much about the optics.
Unfortunately, it wasn't the only time in my career that I had to do that. Have lots of experiences with doing things wrong to begin with.
Okay. Andrea and Michael, any thoughts on a pivot that this made you think about?
Yeah, um, mine is similar to what Jeff just described. I mean, I think about, especially early in my my leading people, one of the concepts in your book was around what's a manager versus what's a leader. And when I started reading that chapter, I'm like, oh my God, like I realistically, probably the first 20 years of my leading people, I was a manager, and I wouldn't really define myself as a leader until maybe the last several years of my career. And it's because of just making that shift from, it's not about you, it's about your people. And then really putting people at the forefront. And now I think about leading a team, it's more like being a teacher. And that took me a long time to get there. And I think it's all the mistakes that we make, all the missteps. It's just experience, right? Experience going through those things that you hope you pivot correctly. And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. And I learned from that too. But it's all of those experiences and the years of learning that like get you to a point where you're like, okay, I could talk to you all day long about the mistakes and the missteps I've made and what I learned from them, and now I'm just here to like help you rise and succeed. So what can I do better?
Yeah. Well, mistakes refine you. They don't define you unless
Yeah.
you let go.
In your book, babe. Love that.
And also, I think that nobody gives you a playbook. There are
No.
so many leadership books that tell you methodologies and frameworks and stages and all that. But there is no one playbook for your role, for your company, for your stage, for your time, for your personality. You kind of have to create it, right? Would you agree? Or
100%. And I think with that too, like you just mentioned, there's no playbook for where you're at. And I think what we also have to think about is every place you go has a different culture. And do you fit in or do you not fit in? And that's one of my pivot moments is learning the hard way that I did not fit into a culture and I did not want to stay there. It took I learned that far too late. Like I stayed there way too long. And when I finally chose to leave, I was like this like weight lifted off of my shoulder. But it took me a long I was like I mentioned, I was there longer than I should have been. But that is again an experience that you go through.
I hear you, and I know a thing or two about that. And for me, it took being called a shrub in a forest, pine trees, um, to know that I'm not in the right place anymore. And yeah, it's way, way overdue my time. And sometimes you're not ready for that next move anyway. But I talk about the DIA concept, the do it anyway. And for those who have not read the book, ever since I was a kid, I would have this image in my head from a time when I was standing at the edge of a diving board with about 30 of my colleagues, my student colleagues, yelling, please jump, just jump. It was PE, back then we called it physical education, gym. And we had to jump off of the diving board. And I was scared, so scared of heights at the moment. And eventually I had the courage to do it anyway, as scared as I was. And so nothing bad happened to me. I just splashed a lot and I got out. But every time I have that moment where I have so much hesitation and I'm not ready, I know I'm not ready. I just picture myself at the edge of that diving board and I push myself forward and I know that I have to have faith and it's going to be fine. And I think that's the problem that we have here is we allow fear to shackle us too much. We don't trust ourselves or a lot of other people, our humankind, colleagues, and I don't know, everybody who breathes around us as much. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for figuring it out. And I think that's a problem because we are very creative human beings. We have survived centuries. We know how to make things work. So I don't know what it is around that much hesitation. Do you agree, Mike, or what do you think?
Well, with the do I agree with the figuring it out, the fear of kind of the unknown? I do. I think that one of the pivotal moments for me that directly relates to that is very early in my career, right after I was out of college. I was at this company called AutoZone. You may know them, the largest discount retail auto parts company in the country, and I was kind of thrown into this environment because I was one of the few people coming out that knew anything about PCs, local area networks. It was still kind of the mainframe days and COBOL, CICS, DB2.
I didn't ask you to, reprogram DOS or anything, right?
Well, they sent me out to do a little of everything. I might be one moment with the CEO helping, develop reports, doing things that we would call analytics today. And the next moment I might be on the shop floor in the distribution center trying to figure out how shipping labels work. And that was a real day for me where I went from one to the other. And that is always, that day has always stuck with me. But it was representative of almost my entire experience there, which was I was making commitments to do things and deliver on things that I didn't necessarily know how to do, and I was full of fear for most of my employment at that time. But it taught me that it taught me the importance of being able to step out and take that chance and kind of do it despite the fact that you're fearful, or maybe you don't know how to do it and you're going to figure it out. And yes, I made some mistakes along the way, and fortunately none of them were fatal. And that's the other thing you learn, is that most mistakes are not fatal.
Yeah.
And I went on to kind of two things happened in my life after that reinforced that for me. Was one, the culture at Nike, which was a little bit of a, we say we're going to go do something, we declare it, and we may not know how we're going to get there, but we're going to get there no matter what. We're going to figure it out and we're going to get there. And then the other one was one of my favorite authors, Max Dupree, talks about in his book talks about. But by the way, one of my favorite authors alongside you, Nora. But but
Like,
but he talks about the importance of making promises and how important it is as a leader, to make promises to the people you lead, to the people you're working for, to your stakeholders, and then to deliver on those. And that idea of making commitments, sometimes for things that you don't know exactly how you're going to do it, but you have you started to build over time that confidence that you can get there. And anyway, that to me is, I agree with you. Fear holds us back so many times.
right. No, I totally get that. And towards the end of the book, I had a chapter around manifestation and the power of believing first, so that you can see it. And I think a lot of times people just say, well, show me, and then I'll believe it. And I think it's the opposite. You have to believe in your ability to make things happen. You have to trust people. And I think that somebody just put a comment. I love the concept of do it anyway. Stepping out of our comfort zones and into the unknown is how true growth happens. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know who specifically it was, but you don't grow if you're always in your comfort zone. You don't grow if you're not taking some chances. You're not going to make an omelet without cracking some eggs. That's, one of the favorite expressions I hear. So too many people are too precautious. They want the tried and true. They don't want to make mistakes. And I think we need to cultivate a culture of forgiveness. We need to allow people to breathe. We need to allow people to just try things and screw up. It's okay. I mean, you're going to have zero moments. I am not in any way saying the world is only hero moments. I'm saying you're going to have your fair share of zero moments too. You learn from them and you try not to repeat the same zero moments, and you try to take zero moments and make them hero moments, right? So I know I'm getting the nod that we need to wrap up here. So thank you, John. But I want to flip the script here and ask each of you if you have a question that you wanted to ask that we didn't get to cover. Anything specific that you wanted to make sure we got to? And you could put me on the spot. It could be an uncomfortable question for me as well, but I'm fine with it. Asked you plenty of those.
I don't have a specific question, Nora, but I think this book it's different. I think it's different because it's the human side of leadership, and we've said that multiple times in this program today. But so many of the leadership books out there are the frameworks, are the step by step, and this is owning up to being human. And we talked about it when we were talking about AI in the future. How do you stay human? Well, you do it by following some of what you teach in the book and owning up to being human ourselves, and making sure that our teams know that as well. So I want to thank you for that message from the book, more than ask a question.
Well, I appreciate that observation. So thank you for sharing that. And can I share a little secret? I finally got to hear my own book. And by the way, the audiobook is initially narrated by Jeff Tunn, who wrote the foreword. So I hope that you'll all give it a listen at some point. His is very, very eloquent and beautifully written, and his voice is amazing. And then I got to hear my own voice. Which I realized, okay, I am not a voice talent. I am not a voice actress. I recognized all of the wrong hesitations, all the mispronunciations that I didn't stop and correct. There are so many humbling human moments in my book. You could tell I was not coached on how to actually narrate this book, but I'm glad that I left everything in. And this was a lesson for me that sometimes you just have to be yourself and allow people to hear how you really sound, because it's just authentically who you are. And maybe they'll not enjoy that, or maybe they'll forgive it, who knows, but at least they're getting the most human side of who you are, even as you're narrating your own book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that, Nora. Yes. And I can't wait to hear the audiobook and listen to it. I was going to say, now give yourself some credit. Remember when you were painting that tree and you told us about that?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, you're an artist, and you never thought you were an artist. So maybe you are a voiceover and you never thought you could be.
I don't know, maybe, but I would need to practice a lot. By the way, that tree that inspired me is hanging right behind me. If you see that tree, yeah, there is the tree that inspired me to see. And I'll make this the last story, and then we can wrap up. I was probably 10 years old, and I was in this class, a recreation class after school, and we were all taken out to this playing field, and all there was grass and trees. We had paintbrushes and paints and all that, and our instructor said, all right, I want you all to paint the same tree. That was it. And he came over and he's like, just, lean in and really look at this tree. And, I was, okay, I got to paint the tree, but I started to really see everything about this tree. Like, it wasn't just green and a brown stalk. There were all kinds of shadows and lights and all that. And I really took my time with it. I had no idea what I was doing, except I was listening and watching and learning and leaning in. And when I was done, it actually looked like a tree. And this instructor came back. He could have said, all right, everybody, just hand it in. I hope you had a good time. But he actually had a kind moment, and he said, wow, looks like you're an artist. You did an amazing job. And I had never heard anybody call me an artist before. And I had never tried to actually draw a tree before. And that was a very, very pivotal moment for me as a child, to recognize that I have some kind of talent and that I have potential. So we all have the ability to inspire people and to be kind enough to really transform their thinking and to lead them into a channel or into an avenue, not make them think that they're shrubs, not make them think that they're limited. We can always propel people into unlimited possibilities if we give them a chance. Michael, I see you nodding. Do you have a final reflection?
I do. I think I'm thinking about a couple of the first conversations we had when we started talking about you writing a book, and I remember I read the first chapter that you let me read, and I said, first and foremost, and I think I said this a couple of times over your journey. I said, first and foremost, I enjoyed reading. It was just a fun read, and that more than anything, that's what the reader wants, right? They want to enjoy it, and so I'm getting these great lessons, but I'm also enjoying doing it. And I think anybody that's thinking about this, picking this up, it is a fun read. The other thing that we talked about was the fact that I said, hey, some of my favorite leadership books are the ones where you alluded to this earlier, I'll read the whole book, but then there are moments that I want to go back to a particular chapter because of something that's happening in my life or some message that I want to convey. Maybe I'm actually just mentoring somebody else and I want to go back to a particular chapter and reread it to be re-inspired and kind of refresh my memory. And this book is that. I've already found myself going back to things. And so I think those are two takeaways for me, that if anybody asked me about this book, those are two things that I would point out. It's a fun read, and there's so many great insights, and they're packaged in a way that you can go back and not just read it once, but go back to it many times. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. And for those who don't know, I sat with Mike Smith at a luncheon or a breakfast, I don't remember, somewhere in the city back in May of last year. And I pitched this idea of putting some of the stories that I used to write in my articles into a book. And Mike is like, do it. And I said, really? Are you sure I should do it? He said, yeah. And he was the first person to say, you know what? I'll be there with you. I'm going to be your accountability partner. I'm going to meet with you every month and check on your progress and cheer for you. And to his credit, he did. And we met for 3 more months. I mean, the first month, I think I did nothing but think about it. But then for 3 months afterwards, I was sharing chapters and structure and what was coming next and all that. And by August, I think we were done with the book. And yeah, he was one of the first people to actually read the whole book. God help him. God bless him. But I thank you so much for being alongside me on this journey. And I thank all of you for taking a chance on reading this book early before it was in front of a publisher. And I will share that, yes, I did have those talked about imposter syndrome moments where, like, did I do the right thing? Is this worth publishing? If anybody tells you that they think that their book is the best right away and everything's perfect, they're not right. You always have doubt and you always wonder, is this going to make a difference? Is it going to resonate? So thank you, all of you, for sharing so much of how this actually made you think differently or what resonated, and for these lovely insights that you've been talking about and sharing. And thank you all for tuning in today. And for those of you who are watching this as a replay, and thank you again to the Institute. If you'd like to know more about the book, on my website, 𝗚𝗏𝗄𝗏.com, Zero to Hero is right there under the book section. And it is on Amazon, and it is available on Audible as well, and an ebook. So 4 different ways you can interact with the book. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.